Sometimes Halloween brings the real demons out of the shadows. Today we're discussing people who snapped on Halloween night and became murderers. B.J. Liske, whose hatred for his stepmother took a deadly turn. The jealous Eric Copple, who just couldn't handle his wife's friendships. And Daniel Clay, who was giving Chelsea Bruck a ride from a Halloween party, but she never made it back home. Halloween of 2010 was a day just like any other for 16-year-old Devon Griffin, who lived with her mother Susan and stepfather William Liske and his older brother Derek in Martin, Ohio. To the outside world, the Liskes looked like a happy family, and they were for the most part. The only problem in their family was Devon's stepbrother BJ. Right from the start, BJ was very unhappy about his father's marriage to Susan. This led him to having an incredibly strained relationship with her, and that strained relationship eventually turned into a massacre where 3 innocent lives were lost.
My brother and I, we didn't have the strongest relationship. With that being said, I missed him a lot. I missed all the cool things my brother did, but when it came to when I turned 23, that hit me pretty hard too. It's like, now I'm officially older than he ever was.
According to Devon, his stepbrother was usually gloomy and dark. He kept to himself most of the time, but on the morning of Halloween in 2010, he was happy and more talkative than Devon had ever seen him. Devon had spent the night at his father's house and had gone to a church concert in the morning. Devon headed straight to his room to play video games after he came home. He did that for a while, and then he noticed that the house was strangely quiet. Was no one in the house? Usually he would hear his stepfather watching TV, his mother cooking in the kitchen. Were they sleeping? Confused, Devon headed to his parents' room, and there he found both of them in bed with the comforter pulled over their faces for some reason. Devon tried to talk to them but received no response. He pulled the covers down, and as soon as he did, he saw blood covering his parents and the entire bed. He went upstairs to Derek's room and found that he had also been murdered. At first, Devon thought it was a Halloween prank, but soon he realized his parents were dead. Someone had murdered 46-year-old Susan and 53-year-old William Liske. Devon immediately rushed out of the house and called his aunt Lori. Lori called the police and headed over to the Liske household herself. This was the point where Lori told the police that she suspected William Liske Jr., or BJ, as his family called him, to be the suspect. He's threatened Susie before, but there's been all kinds of trouble, claimed Lori. Things started escalating when BJ started growing up. The family tried moving him into a group home for mental health patients, but it seemed like his violence had no end. William himself would end up receiving several injuries because of his son's attacks, but after all of this, he still tried to be a good father to him. The final straw came when BJ was 18 and he attempted to attack Susie while she was showering. But the night before the murders, his father had let him crash at home after a long time. Because Devon never really stopped to say hi to his family when he came back home, the police believed that BJ could have killed his parents and brother before the young boy had returned home, which explains why Devon managed to survive. A neighbor reported that she heard gunshots at 6:30 a.m., which might be when BJ committed the crime. The police arrived at the scene, and it was then that they discovered that Derek had died due to blunt force trauma, and both Bill and Susan had been shot 3 to 4 times. It was later discovered that Susan might have also been assaulted by the murderer, which explains the weird position her body was sprawled in when discovered. There was some evidence of a struggle, but the police eventually concluded that the victims had been killed in their sleep. But who was the culprit? A bloody claw hammer was found in the house, and the police believed that was one of the murder weapons. Earlier that day, Lori had tried to call the Liskes at 7 and 9 a.m. because Derek hadn't shown up to her house when he had agreed to do some work for her. She also noted that the family's Ford F-150 pickup truck was missing from their property, and this was when BJ became the suspect. Because while all of this was happening, he was nowhere to be found. BJ had spent the day before at a cabin hunting with his father. This is where the police discovered him along with the missing Ford pickup truck. And lo and behold, the police found a .22 caliber gun that was believed to be the murder weapon, along with traces of blood in the car. And that was enough for them to implicate BJ. The arrest was pretty smooth, and he was initially just charged with 1 count of murder, to hold him until he could be taken to trial. When the police started their questioning, Devon said that BJ was in the family driveway when Devon had returned from the church concert earlier in the day and found him loading something into his dad's white truck.
New details now on the man accused of murdering 3 family members. He faced a judge this morning in Ottawa County Common Pleas Court. William Liske is charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder.
BJ eventually ended up admitting to his crimes on a phone call with his mother, saying that he wasn't in his right mind when he committed the murders. In November 2010, BJ was charged with 6 counts of aggravated murder, 2 for each person he killed. First, he pleaded not guilty, but he eventually ended up pleading guilty and apologized for killing his family members, blaming Satan and mental illness for his actions. BJ was sentenced to life in jail, but he couldn't take it, and in 2015, he ended his own life in his prison cell, bringing this gruesome story to a close. But if you thought it couldn't get any more twisted, wait for the next case.
Napa Valley, the heart of California's idyllic wine country. A place of vineyards, breathtaking views, the good life, and if nothing else, a safe place to live. And then, Halloween 2004.
Napa, California is one of the most beautiful places for anyone to make a home. But the same can't be said for roommates Adrian Insagna and Leslie Marza, who were found dead in their bedrooms on the night of Halloween 2004, marking the first time in 2 years for a homicide to have taken place in Napa.
I had never heard anything like it. I knew right away that it was something awful. And then I went to my door and stood kind of in the doorway under the stairs. I heard a male flying down the stairs. I figured I was next, not knowing what to do. I just ran into the backyard. I've never, ever felt that terrified, like I was in a horror movie. I thought I was going to die.
Adrian and Leslie had lived together with their third roommate, Lauren. Together, they had spent the evening handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. By 11, they had turned the lights off and gone to bed. Adrian and Leslie slept upstairs while Lauren's room was downstairs. All was well until 2 a.m. when Lauren woke up to the sound of someone screaming from upstairs. She immediately rushed upstairs, and when she realized someone had broken into their house, she retreated and ran out the back door.
This is 911 emergency. What are you reporting?
Oh my God, we got attacked.
Who attacked you?
I don't know what happened.
Okay.
My roommate was hurt. Oh my God. I think that's our God. You know who might have done that? Oh God.
There's everywhere. Adrian just lying down next to her bed. She was alive still, but I could tell in her eyes she was gone. I had never really seen someone die before.
Once she was sure the intruder had left the house, she once again went in and saw her worst nightmare come true. Leslie was face down in a pool of and Adrian was bleeding heavily, alive, but it seemed like her body would give up soon. Blood covered the entire room.
Large amounts of just horrendous.
Lauren was terrified, but she managed to call 911. The paramedics arrived on the scene. At that point, Leslie was already dead and Adrian passed away soon after. Both of them had received multiple stab wounds.
They didn't appear to be weathered. They didn't appear to have been there for a long time.
The police found tons of cigarette butts outside their house. According to Lauren, the girls didn't smoke, so they must have come from the murderer. Had the man waited outside biding his time, waiting for the girls to go to sleep so he could attack? They also found blood that didn't match the 3 girls, but DNA testing wasn't easy back then, and it definitely wasn't fast.
In a few minutes' time, my entire life was changed.
The murder sent the town into a frenzy. For a while, people had believed that the culprit was mobster Francis Ford Coppola, who owned the winery where Leslie worked. But the rumor never had any basis to it. The police, however, did believe that Leslie was the intended victim because of how violently she had been attacked. The police speculated that Adrian might have come to her defense, and that's how she died. The truth is that Leslie was the more popular of the two victims. She had a huge group of friends, and her friends claimed that she was extremely popular with men. She wasn't a player or anything, but she was just sweet and kind to everyone. When the police started searching Leslie's computer, they discovered that an ex had proposed to her and was turned down, and had recently reached out to Leslie before the murder. She was also in contact with tons of her exes and their families, so to the police, Leslie was the more likely target. Adrienne was, on the other hand, a quiet girl. She only had a few friends, and Lily Prodholm was one of them. Together, the two had survived a fatal car crash. Adrienne was dating a man named Christian Lee at the time, and the two had met up on Halloween night, which is when they had an argument about Christian's jealous behavior, but nothing seemed to suggest that he had murdered her. The police interviewed more than 1,500 people to try and find the murderer, but none of the DNA samples matched. The case almost went cold because there were just no leads. In the wake of it all, Lily Prodholm, Adrienne's best friend, decided to marry her boyfriend Eric Copple a year after saying no to his proposal. Adrienne's mother was invited to the wedding, and it was a happy occasion for everyone. In September 2005, a year after the murders, the police decided to turn to the public for help. They released information about the cigarette butts found at the crime scene. The cigarettes were a rare variation of Camels that had only been on the market for a short time. DNA tests revealed that the cigarettes definitely belonged to the murderer. And while it was a long shot, the police thought that revealing the information would help people track the attacker down. But what they didn't know was that the murderer would come calling himself. In a matter of a few seconds, Eric himself would confess to killing Adrienne and Leslie. Even Lily didn't know this was going to happen. The confession took everyone by surprise, including the police. While they had believed that Leslie was the primary target, Eric didn't know Leslie at all. He had never even met her. What really happened was that Lily had backed out of marrying Eric when he had initially proposed. Now, he knew that her and Adrienne talked to each other about everything, including this. And in a fit of jealousy, Eric believed that it was Adrienne who had actually convinced Lily not to marry him. Eric was so extremely hostile towards Adrienne because he was jealous of how close she was to Lily. Some people also believed that he really wanted to kill his wife, but since he was obsessed with her, he decided to do the next best thing and kill her best friend. What's really strange is that Lily never saw it coming. Would she have figured it out if the police had released the information about the cigarettes earlier? Who knows? But if you thought that was strange, the next case will confuse you even more.
Eric Bruck attended that Halloween party in Frenchtown Township, and then her body was discovered in Ash Township 6 months later at a construction site.
Chelsea Bruck was a 22-year-old woman full of life when her future was suddenly taken away from her on Halloween 2014. She was last seen alive at a Halloween party in a poison ivy costume. She was happy and radiant. No one knew that in less than 12 hours, she would be dead. Her remains abandoned at an industrial site. What's tragic is that Chelsea's body was discovered months later, in April 2015. She had died of blunt force trauma to her head and had several fractures to her face, jaw, neck, and teeth. But who could have done this? Chelsea was seen leaving the last party of her life at around 3 a.m. with a man her friends didn't seem to recognize. In the morning, her parents realized that she never came back home. After waiting for a few hours and having no leads on where she could be, a search party was sent out for her. But what her family didn't know was that this search was going to last 6 whole months and would end on an extremely tragic note. Chelsea's body was discovered in April 2015, which is when the police launched an investigation into what could have gone down. The location was 10 miles from where the party was held, so the police were a little confused as to how Chelsea's remains could have ended up here, unless it had all been planned out. On September 2nd, 2015, the police discovered a pair of leggings at the crime scene. They were Chelsea's. DNA tests revealed a man's DNA on the leggings, suggesting that Chelsea had been assaulted before her brutal murder. The DNA sample was unknown though, and Chelsea's body was too decomposed for them to find any more. But the police did conclude that she had died after 2.5 minutes of sustained The DNA evidence eventually led the police to a man named Daniel Clay in July, nearly 2 years after the crime had been committed. When he was arrested for the crime, Clay revealed chilling details that opened up a brand new Pandora's box. Clay confessed to the crime and said that him and Chelsea had hit it off at the Halloween party, after which they had snuck out to hook up. Chelsea wanted a ride back home and the two decided to have sex in the backseat of his car. Things got a little heated and, according to Clay, Chelsea asked him to and slap her during the act. That is when Clay believes he hit her too hard, ending her life. Clay talked about how he tried to perform CPR when he realized that Chelsea was dead, but at that point nothing really mattered. With a corpse in his car, Clay drove around for an hour because he was freaking out and just didn't know what to do. Then he found an abandoned industrial site, which is where he decided to leave her body, hoping that no one would find her or link her to the crime. But that still doesn't give an explanation for why her leggings were found a little further away from where the body was discovered. Clay initially fled to a mobile home where deputies tried to arrest him, but then he confessed 2 hours about how Bruck died and how he tried to cover it up. Jessica Pradell, who worked with Bruck at the time and had a child with Clay, said she remembers Clay and someone else approaching a group, including her and Bruck, but that she didn't remember much, if any, conversation between them. Pradell said she briefly smoked marijuana with Clay later that night, and the last she saw him was at 1 a.m. In the many months since Bruck's disappearance, Pradell said she doesn't recall Clay saying anything about Bruck whenever they met. But the day he was arrested, she received 2 voicemails from him while she was still at work. Clay said he was extremely sorry that he messed up big time and that he was going to be gone for a really long time, Pradell testified. On July 25th, 2016, Clay was charged with second-degree murder, followed by additional charges on September 2nd, 2016, on the grounds of concealment of a body. He was then taken away to be sentenced to life in prison for the brutal crime. What do you think? Do you think he really meant to kill Chelsea, or was it just a coincidence?